online. Tales and Tunes is a spoken word and music open mic. So tales and tunes and music and anything else that you want to kind of perform in front of your camera from the privacy of your own living room or somebody else's if you're lucky. We always start with an interactive story. So basically, I'm going to tell a story, but you guys are going to give me everything that I put into it. So I'm going to make up a brand new story for National Storytelling Week. It's National Storytelling Week here in the UK, which is super exciting. I think this is the first thing I've done for National Storytelling Week. I'm a bit late off the mark. So we're going to make up a new story and then we'll go around. We'll kind of go in the order that you sort of arrived, I think, probably. And then if we get to the end of everybody, we'll go around again until we feel like stopping. That's pretty much it. I will put later a thing in the chat that's got my PayPal link if you want to donate to me, my storytelling, or the care of my amazing autistic daughter and the wonderful carer who's upstairs right now looking after her. That would be awesome too, but absolutely no obligation to do so. I think that's everything. I feel like I'm the air hostess that's gone like, check the door. So we shall begin as we always do with an interactive story. I think I'll do my traditional kind of interactive stories now. So I'm going to create this extreme story for you. The first thing I need to know, three things to begin with. The first thing I need to know from you is who or what you would like to be the center person of this story, the hero. Who is the story going to be about? You can chuck some suggestions in the chat or you can shout them out. It's entirely up to you. Just letting Norman in there. Hey, Norman. I'm going to keep an eye on the chat. A poor woman. Oh, bit of poverty. Norman, how you doing? Are you with us? Just arriving. A poor woman. Do we have any more description of her, Roisin? Since yours is the only suggestion, I might go with it. A happy cat. What if it's the big cat? Hi, AJ.
Hello.
We're just starting our interactive stories. I'm just asking for suggestions in the chat or shouting out or who or what you would like this story I'm about to create to be about. So far, the suggestions we have are a poor woman, a happy cat, any other offers? Otherwise, I'll pick one of those two. Anything else you'd like to hear a story about tonight that I'm about to make?
A magic hamster.
A magic hamster. All right. So, and a poor old woman who has much better off, has fallen hard times. Oh, exciting. Or a magic hamster. So let's I don't know, should we go for whooping and cheering like I would do if it was an improv show? Whooping and cheering for a poor woman. A little amount of whooping and cheering. Whooping and cheering for a happy cat. Like very small. And whooping and cheering for a magic hamster. I feel like the poor woman takes it. Yeah? Okay. So this is a story. Waleed says a big cat. Maybe we need to get the big cat to feature it.
How big is the cat?
Well, there's another story which I will make Roisin tell you all again. About the big cat and the things that it did through the roof of the World Storytelling Cafe. But that is another story for another time. This story is going to be about a poor old woman. The next thing I need to decide before I start telling this story is, what is this poor woman in search of? What does she want in our story? What is her heart's desire? It can be very silly or it can be very sensible. It's entirely up to you. So you can stick the suggestions in the chat, you can shout them out. Or maybe it's a big cat that she wants. I just saw Waleed's suggestion when I said that.
She lost her love.
Oh, she lost her love.
Yeah.
There we go. Any advance on lost love or big cat? Maybe her lost love is a big cat. Could we have she lost her magic hamster? Okay.
Yeah. Maybe that's why she's poor.
There we go. Okay, so the story is about a poor woman who lost her magic hamster. And the only thing we need to decide before I can start telling the story is who or what might stop her. Thank you, Claire. Lost her marbles. That may well happen along the way. Who or what is going to try and stop her? Who might prevent her from getting back her magic hamster?
A happy cat, because it's going to eat it.
There we go. See, we had all the suggestions. We just needed to get them in the right order. Okay. Lovely. All right. So what's going to happen is I'm going to start telling this story. And when I get to a point from and I need a little bit of input from you, I will say so. And you can shout it out or put it in the chat. And I shall carry on the story. And hopefully by the end of it, we'll have a brand new story for National Storytelling Week. Okay. Once upon a time, there was a poor woman. And she lived in a tiny house right on the edge of town. And once she had been a very happy and, well, rich woman because she used to have a magical hamster. Not just any hamster. This hamster was so magical it could grant wishes to whoever came to visit that hamster. And so the people of the town, the people of the village would come and they would wish for things and they would get them. And then they would be so grateful. They would give the woman money. She would grow rich. But then one day, she woke up and she looked in the magic hamster's beautiful golden palace of a cage. And the magic hamster was gone. And then she fell on hard times and no one was interested in her without her magic hamster until she had to live in this tiny, tiny little house on the edge of town. And one day she grew fed up with this life and she thought, maybe my magic hamster isn't gone forever. Maybe I can find him somewhere. So she set out from that house and she set on the road into town. And lovelies and gentle humans, where do you think she went first in her search for her magic hamster? If you were this poor woman, where would you look first?
The marketplace.
The marketplace, of course. Thought maybe somebody stole him to like sell for money. Maybe somebody in the marketplace will know. So she went into the marketplace and she asked all of the market traders. She asked the man on the fruit store. She asked the woman on the clothes store. She asked around, and no one had heard of her magic hamster until she got to one stall right at the very end. What was that stall at the very end that she got to? What were they selling on that last one?
Slippers.
Slippers. Of course. She got to the slipper store. And she was the last one that she asked. And she said, slipper merchant, I've been looking for my magic hamster. You might remember, like years ago, I had a magic hamster and everything was great. And then the magic hamster went. And the slipper merchant said, well, it's strange you should say that because I did sell some very fluffy slippers about the time your magic hamster disappeared. And I thought as I handed them over to the person that the there was a little movement in them, but I thought, oh, it's just the fluff. But well, I could tell you if you buy some of my slippers, I might tell you just who it is. And so she paid for the slippers. And who was it? Who was it? The slipper merchant told the old woman had taken the slightly moving fluffy slipper that was probably her magic hamster. Who might it have been?
A vizier.
A vizier. A vizier is like the one that like advises the sultan, isn't it?
Yeah.
I had to think. It's like, let me get that way. He said, well, this is why I didn't want to tell you before. It's actually the sultan's vizier, the one who advises him about everything. He was the one that took the slippers, and I believe that he bought them for the sultan. And so the poor woman said, oh, thank you so much. And she went to the sultan's palace. And when she got to the sultan's palace, she knocked on the door. Now, if you have anything to knock on, you need to knock on it now to make a sound. Here we go. And the door was opened by a guard. Door creaked like this. And the guard went, what do you want? Because that's how all guards speak in my stories. And she said, oh, I'm terribly sorry to bother you, but a few years ago, your vizier bought some slippers from the slipper merchant. And I think that my magic hamster, who, like he's really magic, but also who's my only friend in the world. And I think they might have been in the slippers. The guard said, well, you better come in then. And so she was shown into the vizier's part of the palace. And she went to the vizier and she said, I'm really sorry to bother you. It's just that I'm looking for my magic hamster. I've fallen on hard times without him. And the slipper merchant said, you bought some very fluffy slippers. And he said, yes, I bought those a few years ago. And there was some strange creature in them, but I just threw it out into the kitchen. I figured it could eat scraps. She went, oh no, that was my magic hamster. I'll go and speak to the people in the kitchen. Thank you, Vizier, for letting me know. So she went all the way down to the kitchens, which is like a long way down in the palace. And when she got to the kitchen, there was the chef and all the cooks and everyone, and she was just getting in everyone's way. She said, I'm just wondering if anyone saw my magic hamster. And they said, oh, no, if there's rats here, we just get rid of them. Like, no, it wasn't a rat. It was a magic hamster. It could grant wishes to anyone. And he said, well, there was a while ago, a strange creature in here. They didn't look like the normal rats we get in here. It looked like something completely different. And, well, there's a big cat that always comes out of the door for scraps, and so we just threw it out to that. She went, "Oh, you threw my hamster to a cat." I said, "Yeah, but I don't think he ate it. I think he was just playing it." She said, "Well, where does the cat live? And where did the people in the kitchen tell the woman that this cat who had taken her hamster lived? Where do you think she lived?"
Behind the ice cream shop.
Behind the ice cream shop. So the people in the kitchen said to the old woman, "Well, we do know that the cat, as well as come to us for scraps, like goes around the back of the ice cream shop for scraps. So maybe you could try there." Well, she went from the Sultan's palace and she went all the way through the streets until she came to the ice cream shop. And at the back of the ice cream shop, she saw an entire cat palace. There were queues of cats going round the corner. And there, she saw at the front, was the big cat. The big cat, bigger than them all. Who knows what he did in the World Storytelling Cafe? We're not going to repeat it. And he was sat there. And there were queues of cats coming up to the cat and making wishes. And every single cat that wished something got their wish. Well, instantly, that woman was suspicious. And she joined the queue of cats and she started talking about what was happening. And each cat said, "Oh, yes, there's this big cat here and he grants wishes. And that's why we're all queuing up around the block." And when she finally got to the front of the queue, she said, it's lovely to meet you, big cat. I just wondered, how is it that you grant these wishes?" And the big cat said, "I couldn't possibly tell you how I grant the wishes." She said, "Is it perhaps a hamster-like creature that once belonged to me?" The big cat said, No, it couldn't possibly be." She said, "Show me what's behind that curtain." He was doing the whole Wizard of Oz thing with the thing behind the curtain. So, "Show me what's behind that curtain." He said, "No." Well, she pulled the curtain back, and sure enough, there was her magic hamster. She said, "You have to give it back to me. That's my hamster." And the hamster was so happy to see the poor woman. And the cat said, "No, this hamster is my absolute fortune. You cannot have it back." Now, we have to try and find a way, ladies and gentle humans, to get this hamster back to this woman. So if you were this woman, what would you try? What would you try first to get your hamster back from this cat who was not giving him back in any way, shape, or form? What methods should we attempt? Distract him with a toy.
Oh.
Very nice. The woman said, "Oh, let me see what I have in my pockets that I might exchange for it." And she got out of her pockets one of those laser pens, which are really cool. And she started playing with it on the wall next to it. And the cat went, "No, I have put my sunglasses on. You will not distract me with a laser pen. And I am not any ordinary cat. I am the big cat." I said, "Oh, no, it's worth a try." And so she had to rack her brains again. And she looked around. It's like, is there anything else that I can try that's going to get this cat, or I can distract? Is there any other way I can get past him? What should we try next? The laser pen didn't work. I don't know.
Luxury kibbles.
Luxury kibbles. She said, "I'll just pop to the shop next door and I will get a feast." Oh, fresh fish as well. And she did. She went to the shop next door that not only had beautiful luxury kibbles, the best cat food you could imagine, but it also had fresh fish. And she asked the shop to prepare this great plate of food for the cat. And she went up to the cat and she said, "I will give you all of this in exchange for my magic hamster." And the cat looked at it. And he got his minion cats to grab it and he stuffed it all in one go. "You still can't have your hamster." Well, this cat was clearly just pure evil. She had one last chance, because it's a story. She has to get it on the third one. She had one last chance to get that magic hamster. What shall we try that will definitely work this time?
Catnip mouse.
Say again?
Catnip mouse.
A catnip mouse, obviously. And then she remembered that there are things that are more magical to cats than even magical hamsters. And so she reached deep in her pocket, knowing, obviously on the way, that there was a cat there. She had got a mouse, which was stuffed with catnip. And she very carefully took it out of her pocket and waved it in front of the big cat's nose. Now, the big cat, where he lived, had never seen anything like this before. And he was soon mesmerized by this catnip. And when he smelt it, he couldn't resist. He started reaching up for his paws. And as soon as he'd grabbed it, he stuffed his face in it and he couldn't stop himself. And while he was distracted, the poor woman jumped in and grabbed her hamster. And she ran all the way back past the ice cream shop, all the way back past the palace, all the way back through the town, past the slipper merchant, saying, "Thank you very much, slipper merchant," as she went past, and ran all the way back to her house. And there she sat with her magic hamster. She said, "I'm so happy to have you back, my hamster." Hamster said, "I've missed you so much." He said, "But I wonder, could we maybe not do wishing every single day? I was growing a little bit tired. And to be honest with you, that's why I nipped out and then I lost my way back. And she said, of course, anything you want. I will not treat you as a cash cow anymore because you are a magic hamster. I will treat you as the friend and we will only do wishes when you feel like it. And because of that, the poor woman and her magic hamster lived happily ever after. And as far as I know, that big cat is still playing with the catnip mouse. And there ends our tale. Yeah. Thank you very much for all your fabulous suggestions. That was fun. You know, when sometimes you make it go, oh, I might keep that. Might keep that and tell it again. Everyone else, feel free to. So that is our new story for National Storytelling Week. But first, I think, well, Kristen, are you ready? Would you like to tell our first tale today?
I will.
Lovely. Let me spotlight you so people can see you, but you can unspotlight yourself if you don't want to.
What's that?
Show yourself. There you go.
So the story that I will share with you is one that it was created a very long time ago, and it's still relevant today, I believe. And I often tell it to children because it's quite gruesome and they love it. Once there was a great king. He had everything. He had his rich palace, his servants, his horses, his hunting dogs, his birds, and a beautiful daughter. Unfortunately, he didn't have his wife. She had died in childbirth, but everything else that he wanted, he had. But he was a proud man and quite a greedy man. And it wasn't long before he felt that his palace just wasn't big enough, it wasn't grand enough, it wasn't amazing enough. He wanted an amazing palace that was high on a hill so that people from all around would have to look up and say, that is where the great king lives. Well, in his land, there was only one hill. It was in the middle of his land and it was covered in trees. And he thought this was ideal, right in the middle of my land. Wherever people come from, they will see my great palace. And if I build the palace of wood, there's all the trees there that I could possibly want. What could go wrong? And so he took his workmen, he went to the big hill with the trees and he said, workmen, chop these trees down. And the workmen put their axes down and said, we can't. You can't? What do you mean you can't? Sire, this is where the naiads live, the creatures who look after nature, and it's their sacred place. We don't even go and break a twig in here, let alone chop the trees down. Am I not your ruler? Well, yeah, but, you know, there's things bigger than kings. There is nothing better and bigger than a king. Get these woods chopped down. Well, still they hesitated. And so he called for his executioner, who had a bigger axe than anybody, and he said, right, executioner, any man that hesitates in chopping these trees down, take his head off right here. Well, much as the men feared the naiads in the sacred grove, the big axe was a bit more immediate. And so, unfortunately, they lifted their axe and struck. And it was only after the first blow that out from the woodland came three beautiful creatures, dressed in green, with long hair and slightly pale green faces. And they said, stop, what are you doing? And he said, well, I'm just a bit of real estate development, really. I'm having my new palace built. Do you not realise this is our home? Do you not realise we care for everything in your kingdom? No, you don't. I'm the king and my servants do that. Be gone with you. At this point, the lead naiad got very angry and she pointed a finger at the king and she said, you, greedy man that you are, we cannot stop you from chopping down our sacred grove, but I curse you. I curse you now because you are a greedy person and I curse you with everlasting hunger. You will never satisfy your hunger until the day you die. The king wasn't that impressed. He went, oh, just get rid of these women and chop these trees down, will you? And so the trees were chopped down, the naiads disappeared into the mists. And the king was happy. The king was very happy that he saw all the trees being felled and the branches lopped off, and the sawmen came and they sawed it down. And it wasn't long before a huge palace was being built where there used to be trees. He couldn't wait. This was going to be amazing. It was going to have balconies. It was going to have windows looking out over all of the kingdom from every angle. And more importantly, any visitor to his kingdom would see how great he was. You know, he was so excited, he got quite peckish. He said, well, I think this calls for a bit of a feast, don't you? And a great feast was prepared. And the king, he ate and he ate and he ate. But the strange thing was, no matter how much he ate, and it was a lot, he still went to bed that night hungry. He lay in bed thinking, oh, if only I could have another little sandwich. And so in the morning, he ordered a great breakfast and he ate that, but it was no good. He still felt hungry. And this carried on. No matter what he ate, he still felt hungry. But it was all right. He was a rich man. He could afford all the food he wanted. But you know what? Even rich men have their limits. And the more feasting and the more eating he did, the more the money ran out. And it wasn't long before, actually, his vizier came to him and said, Your Majesty, you're getting a bit short of money here. You might want to sort of ease up on the feasting thing. But he couldn't, because he was always hungry. And he kept on. And it wasn't long before he actually had to sell the brand new palace to a rich merchant who happened to have come and lived in his kingdom and moved back into his old palace. And he had enough money to do more feasting and more eating, and that was wonderful until the money ran out. And then he had to look round and start selling the furniture and the paintings and the silk hangings and the fine horses and the dogs and the birds. And one day he was sat there in his empty palace, waiting for the buyers who had just bought it from him. And his daughter came and said, Father, I've found a very small hovel for us. We can live there. And he went there and he carried on spending his money on all the food he could get until one day, even that ran out. And he was saying, I don't know what to do. I'm starving. And his daughter said, Father, I love you enough to say, sell me into slavery. Now, you would think that a father would go, of course not, my darling. But his belly rumbled just then. And so he took her down the slave market and got a very good price for her. But even that money ran out. And then he couldn't pay his rent and he was thrown out the hovel and he was walking along the streets of what had been his kingdom one day and he went, no, what have I done? And then he suddenly realised, what was he looking at? But meaty fingers. And so he was so hungry that he and he chewed and he swallowed and he didn't stop there and he chewed and he bit and he stripped the meat off the bones and he carried on until he'd virtually eaten himself. And that's kind of what happens when you mess with nature. And that is the story of the king who ate himself. Yeah, gruesome but nice. You can see why children love it.
That's great. I love that. It's so, I don't know, I haven't heard that story for ages, and I really love. Where does it come from?
It was one of the Greek writers who wrote Baucis
I
and
thought-
Philemon. Euripides.
It was a Greek one, yeah. It
Oh.
sounded very Greek. It's like, no, it's come from
What
somewhere.
I find fascinating is you could look at what's going on in the world today and the way, you know, you've only got to look at the A47 in Norfolk being stripped out and realise, hey, it's still happening.
Yeah, exactly. Sadly, those things don't stop being relevant. All the stories that we tell about nature.
Yeah.
So who was in next? Keith. Keith, are you happy to go for our next story? Lovely. Let me spotlight you, dear. There we go. Oh, your sound's a bit out. We can't hear you, Keith.
Can you hear me now?
Yay!
It was winter time in the Lincolnshire Wolds. And the rabbit, he sneezed, he shivered, and the snow came up to his little tail. I was so hungry, he went off looking for some food. He rubbed his belly. He was tired, hungry, and cold. And there, on the edge of a field, he saw some turnips, 2 turnips. And so he gobbled a turnip up. and it was full. And he thought, perhaps my friend the donkey would like this turnip. And so the little rabbit, he rolled the turnip over to the stable of the donkey. But the donkey wasn't there. He was out and about. The donkey, he snivered, he shivered, and he sneezed, and the snow came up to his knees. He was out looking for food. He rubbed his belly. He was tired, hungry, and cold, looking for food. And there, on the edge of the field, he saw some potatoes. Oh, and he gobbled up the potatoes. And he was full and very satisfied. And he went back to his stable, and there, at the door of his stable, was a turnip. He thought, wonder how that got there. And so he took the turnip over to his friend the sheep. But the sheep wasn't there. She was out. And so he left the turnip at the doorway of the sheep pen. Now, the sheep, she shivered, and she sneezed, and the snow came up to her woolly tail. And she was out looking for food. She rubbed her belly. She was tired, hungry, and cold. And there, at the edge of the field, she saw cabbage, 2 cabbages. And she gobbled up the cabbages. And she was so full. She said, oh, that's great. Great, great. And she went back to her sheep pen. And there, at the doorway of the sheep pen, was a turnip. And she thought, I wonder how that got there. And she thought to herself, well, perhaps my friend the squirrel would like it. And so she took the turnip over to the squirrel's tray, which is it was in a tree, and there was a hole inside the tree, and she pushed the turnip into the doorway, into the hole in the side of the tree, which was the squirrel's house. Now, the squirrel wasn't at home. He was out and about. And he sneezed. And he shivered. And the snow came up to his woolly tail. And he was out hunting for food. He rubbed his belly. He was tired, hungry, and cold. And they remembered in the autumn he had buried some nuts. And so he found a place and he dug up all the nuts. And he shelled them and he gobbled up the nuts. And he was full. And so he went back to his tray, to his house in the tree. And somebody had put a turnip in his doorway and he couldn't get in. But then he remembered his friend the rabbit. Perhaps he would like the turnip. And so he rolled the turnip over to the hole, the rabbit warren in the side of the hill, and he put it in the doorway. Now, the rabbit wasn't tired. He wasn't cold. But he was hungry, and he thought, I wish I hadn't given that second turnip away. But he went outside of his rabbit hole, and there was the turnip. And he gobbled up the turnip, and he was full. And that's the story of the generous rabbit.
Oh, that's really sweet. I'm so glad he got his turnip back. Thank you so much. I love that. Okay, next up we have AJ. Are you ready?
Hello. Okay, I've got a couple of bits here. Let's start with a relatively short poem, which may or may not be up people's street. It's a sci-fi poem that was in my first collection, Portals, and it's called Neuronaut. Pay bandwidth, noob. You don't just jack in and walk these pathways. Can't take a pleasant stroll along the router routes or nice trips home to the motherboard. No. You go in unprepared, you'll be cashed out and on downtime before you can say gig. Too bloatwared to dip those walls of fire. Slapface and block chopped. You ping me. Don't be blinded by the neon on the pave. Stay no-face and keep your V tight. But you can goggle me hatting all you like. It won't help you in the nowhere everywhere. You've got to deep dive and survive on your own. Do your grind, prep your rig, jack in, and sail those light rails through the fizz fabric of anywhere. It's a zing ride. It takes strong circuits. That's why I've got this gear in my head. You'll need hancing too. Okay. And and here's a quick sort of a bit of flash fiction, essentially, on a more of a sort of fantasy base. And it's titled A Recovered Page from the Diaries of Stormclaw Ironpelt. They arrived under cover of rain and darkness. The guards on the ramparts of Salfort were hunkered down against the autumn night, paying more attention to staying warm and dry than what was happening beyond the walls and braziers. No movements were silhouetted against the fires, and apart from the pattering downpour, all was still. Humans are so predictable. In their desires, in their selfishness. The soft-skins had brought this on themselves. They came from the West in peace, they told us. They were no threat to the Erskine tribes. They merely needed some little more land for farming, which we did not do, for crops we neither ate nor cared about. We allowed it. Then the forts were raised. We protested, but went unheeded. We have been a peaceful people for many generations, and we Ironpelts advised caution, but tensions rose. The Black Claw tribe were the first to fight back. They were dead in a fortnight. The Golden Eyes are no more. Never again shall we hear the haggling of the Silvertooths or the poetry of the Brown Furs. The humans claimed territory after territory, and we were pushed further and further east, until finally we were caught between the humans and, well, more on the others another time. We attacked Haven, 3 miles away, a week ago. The Strongpaw tribe led us in a charge of fury not seen in centuries, and we left it a smouldering shell. However, despite being soft-skins, the humans are numerous, and we are few. Too many of us were lost to attempt such an assault again. So the night before Salfort, we squatted and planned in the Haven ruins, lighting no fires and staying out of sight, muffling our breaths to prevent steam plumes. Salfort was not large, but it was important. It held the river and the human supply lines. Its loss would be a great blow to them and boon to us. The following night we marched, the tempest gradually building in front of us and masking our approach. We only hoped a claw would be enough. A claw is 10 of us, a paw is 50, an arm 100. No tribe has ever numbered enough to need more, unlike the humans. The rain that night was brought about by magic. I had said I could not hold it for long. The war had been raging for some months by then, and I was fatigued. There were only 2 of us storm singers left, after all, and Greyface was busy supporting our struggle in the east. But the elements had been easier to reach than I thought. They were on our side in this. As I stood on a low cliff top 1/4 mile from Salfort, the wind ruffled my fur and rain sleeked down my pelt. I stared across the plain, paw raised, snout hairs twitching with my whispered incantations, maintaining the storm while the claw cautiously approached the fort. They arrived under cover of rain and darkness. No alarm was called. No cries went up.
It's so atmospheric. It's like kind of lost in that little world then. Do you know what it reminds you? I used to read loads of David Gemmell as a teenager.
I
So, like,
love David Gemmell.
I know, my
Absolutely
God.
loved it. Heroic fantasy is just
Yeah.
he's a level above
yeah, he's just something else, you know. But it just made me think, oh, I haven't read that in years. Might have to go back now. Just
They're on my
'cause
shelf, and I keep thinking I should revisit them. It's probably been
yeah.
about 20 years myself, I think.
Well, this is what I wonder. Like, will they have the same power as they did when I was a teenager? You know, it's like, yeah. But
Well,
now I'm gonna have to go and check.
yeah, I think some of their power comes from like the humanity of the characters, and I don't
Yeah,
think that will have changed.
yeah,
So I'm hoping that, yeah, I'll appreciate them just as much.
yeah. I will have to go back. Lovely stuff. All right. I think, was Omar here or is Omar gone again? I think Omar might have gone again. Okay. And Norman's not feeling particularly well. Is there anybody else that wants to share, or shall I tell a tale and then we'll go around again? Shall I tell a tale and then we'll go around again? So what, you know, I said that and I went, no idea what I want to tell now. I was so lost in AJ's story. Let me have a think. Do you know what? I'm going to try one that I haven't, because it's kind of gruesome. Now I've told a gruesome story. I'm like, are we up for another gruesome story? Let me, yeah. Let me see. I'm going to spotlight myself, actually. I don't know if I can spotlight myself. Oh, yeah, I can. There we go. I haven't told this story for years, but I'm going to give it a go. I just remember, so John Rowe and I were telling stories in Colchester on the streets, and we were kind of, I'm not sure if we were meant to, but we just went out into Colchester and we were telling, like, trying to tell the most gruesome stories we could to a bunch of young dads that were like standing holding pushchairs outside of Argos. It's one of my most memorable kind of story. I love street storytelling, so and any street story I remember. But this is the story that I told. See if I can remember it all. It's just going to fall out of my mouth. How it falls out of my mouth. So once upon a time, a very long time ago, in a very remote part of Russia, there was a wife and her husband. And I hate to tell you, but in this story, the husband was, well, he hadn't chosen his wife particularly well. She was a very, very angry woman. And every time he would do anything wrong, she would take her huge frying pan and she would just smack him over the head. It really wasn't pleasant. Domestic violence, not a good thing. Anyway, and mostly it was because if he hadn't brought enough money or enough food in. And then, well, one night she was hungry. There wasn't any food in the house. And she said, husband, you go out and you go into town, you take the money and you come back with liver for me. I have a craving for liver. Go to the butcher's, bring me liver. Otherwise, you will feel the wrath of my frying pan. And the husband, he was called Olga. I think he was called Trigorin. I can't remember. Let's call him Trigorin now. So Trigorin, he went out into town and he hadn't actually been allowed out of the house in a very long time. And so when he headed into town, he saw some of his old friends. His friend said, Trigorin, we have not seen you in such a long time. Come into the tavern, share the vodka with us. And he said, well, I do have to get back tomorrow. I have to get to the butcher's before it closes to get my wife some liver. She'll be very angry if I don't come back with liver. She said, oh, she won't notice if it's just like, come in for like one drink. And so he did. And then one drink. His friends hadn't seen him in a long time. And they said, oh, just have another one, Trigorin. He said, well, I suppose it doesn't matter. And one drink became 2 drinks, became 3 drinks, became 4 drinks. And it wasn't long before he realized that he had quite missed his opening to get the liver from the butcher's. He went, oh no, I'm going to be in such trouble when I get home. And he ran out the tavern. He said, friends, you led me astray. And he banged on the door of the butcher's. And the butcher said, go away. It's way past our closing time. I have no liver for you today. So he started making his way very slowly, trying to take the longest route he could so he didn't have to get home. And he found his way, probably just because he was drunk, he went the wrong way. He found his way through the forest. And he was stumbling through the forest, and it was muddy and it was raining. And it wasn't long before, in his drunken state, he slipped over in the mud. And just as he was getting himself up, he saw a pair of feet in front of him. And he looked up, and the feet were attached to the body and the head of a huntsman. Now, the huntsmen were very mysterious people in that land. Nobody quite knew what they did apart from hunting. And when he looked up, he said, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm in your way. And the huntsman said, what seems to be the trouble, sir? And Trigorin, being as drunk as he was, not really thinking whether he should speak to a huntsman or not, he said, I'm going to be in terrible trouble when I get home. My wife, she gets very, very angry. She beats me with the frying pan, and I was supposed to get some liver, and I spent all my money at the pub, and I don't have anything left, and and the butcher's is closed. And the husband said, maybe I can help you there. I said, "No," and the man and Tregorin said, oh, whatever it is you can do, then yes, please help me. The huntsman said, well, not far from here are some gallows. And in the gallows there are hung 3 freshly dead criminals. And I don't suppose they'll be needing their livers. And I don't suppose your wife would notice the difference between where the livers came from. And Tregorin, in his drunken state, seeing his salvation, said, oh, thank you, sir. I'll go straight to the gallows. Oh, you've saved my life. You saved my life. And the huntsman walked off into the distance. And Tregorin went to the gallows. And sure enough, there were those 3 freshly dead corpses. And he took out his knife and, guessing roughly where the liver was, he made an incision and the knife cut through. And he took out the first liver. Then he inserted the second one. That's the sound of a knife in my head. And the second liver. And the third one. 3 livers. And he tucked them inside his coat, all bloody and fresh. And he made his way home to his wife. And as soon as he got in the door, he said, where have you been? I'm starving. I've been waiting a long time. He said, oh, I've bought you. I found the best liver for you. I went so far as I could. I found the best liver ever. I should think so too. Now you sit down there while I cook it. And he put the 3 livers on the table. And she started chopping them. Got, this does look very good liver, husband. Very nice. And as she was chopping, she looked out from her window. She said, Tregorin, can you see something moving in the trees over there? Tregorin went, no, it's probably just the breeze. She said, oh. And she took the liver that she chopped up. She got her frying pan out and she was putting it on the stove. She said, Tregorin, there's definitely 3 figures. They seem to be coming towards the house. And Tregorin started to worry. He said, we'll just lock the door across, I'm sure it's nothing to worry about. And as she fried the liver and it was sizzling, she said, Tregorin, they're coming even closer to the door. There's these strange kind of grey-faced figures. And Tregorin said, sorry, it's just people just a little bit lost. And then just as she was taking the liver and serving it onto the plate, they knocked on the door. And she said, Tregorin, can you answer the door? He said, no, best not to answer. She said, oh, fair enough, I'll answer the door. And as she answered the door, there were 3 grey, sallow-faced figures. And they said, we want our liver. And she said, you can't have, this is my liver. My husband got this for me. They said, we want our liver. She said, no, it is my liver. They said, we want our liver. And they came into the house. And those were the last words that Olga and Tregorin ever heard. When the neighbors came to check on them the next day, there was no sign. And there ends my tale. Thank you. I haven't told that for ages, but I do like it. Nice and brief. All right. Shall we go around again? Roshan, do you have another one for us?
Well, as you told that one, I think we'll stay on the gory theme a bit.
Yeah, let's go.
And when I used to live down on the Kent coast in a little town called Deal, there was a pub there that was the oldest pub in Deal, and it had been there since about the mid-1600s. And when it was a fairly new pub, there was a young man used to work in there. And you'll know the type. He was a pot boy because that was the only job he could get. But really, he only had that job because no one had noticed how amazingly great he was. You know the sort. I'd be amazing if only you people understood how brilliant I am. I'd make a fortune if anybody just gave me that little break, and that's all I need. And this carried on, but of course he was a pot boy. He didn't have a good start. his mother referred to herself as a widow. Most of the neighbours said that she'd be lucky if she could recognise the father of her only son. But she doted on him in the way that mothers do sometimes. So she didn't exactly help, spoilt him rotten, and, you know, just puffed up his ego even more. But he dreamed these dreams of how amazing he would be. But into that little tavern, about once a month, would come a man with a great cloak on, and his horse would be tied up outside, and on the horse would be great saddlebags. And on one side the bags would be empty, and on the other side there would be money bags. And the man would come in and he'd order his drink and he'd sit in the corner, and there'd be a procession of the local ne'er-do-wells, the local cut purses, the local sort of men of the night. And they would bring in sacks or baskets. They would talk to the gentleman for a while. Money would change hands. They'd leave and leave their stuff with him. And the young man would collect the pots, but of course he was curious what was going on here. You know, maybe this was somewhere he could make money. And he got closer and closer to what was going on until one night he was just going to move a pot, and the man grabbed him and said, people who stick their nose in other people's business sometimes find that they lose their nose. No, sir, I was just curious and interested in your business. Well, that's not a good idea, is it, Sunshine? Well, I was just thinking that it looked to me like these people that do business with you might have a way of a kind of business that takes them out into other people's houses at night. What if they do? Well, I thought I could probably do very well at that. At that, the man laughed and he said, the only way you could do that, Sunshine, is if you got a hand of glory. Now, you may know what hand of glory is, but he didn't. He said, what would be that? So he said, well, you have to go down to the house of the widow Drew and you have to ask her if she's got one for sale. Because a hand of glory is made from the hand of a hanged man, and it has to be treated right. But if it's treated right, and you take that and you put it on a doorstep, and you light the candle in it, and you say these words, let all who are awake stay awake, and all who are asleep stay asleep, then the people in that house will stay asleep and you can go in and help yourself. But you'd need a hand of glory. And they're not cheap, and I can't see a pot boy owning one. So just be gone and keep your nose out of my business, lad. Well, the boy knew better than to argue, but he got quite obsessed with this idea, and he decided he'd go down to the house of the widow Drew. And he did, and he knocked on her door and he said, oh, Granny, I wonder, could I purchase a small thing from you? Well, she knew everyone in the town and she knew the boy, and she went, so what is it you're after? And he said, well, I'd like a hand of glory. And she said, you couldn't afford one. They're 5 guineas. You know, I can't just pluck them out of air. I have to buy the hand from the right people at the right time. I have to treat it right. I have to put the right magic in it. Oh, Mrs. Drew, you're a widow like my poor old mum. And all she wants is for her son to look after her. And I promise you, if you would give me the hand of glory on credit, only for the sake of my dear widowed mother, you understand, then I will pay you back from everything I own. Well, the widow Drew said, you know what, you're a good lad in your way, and well, so happens I've heard there's going to be a hanging up Canterbury way. So as long as you know, and I'll be fair with you, I'll give you a year to the day to pay me back my 5 guineas, and as long as you settle up with me, we'll be fine. If not, well, you won't like the consequences. Oh, no, madam, it'll be fine. Take the honest word of a widow's only son. She said, yeah, go on, I'll be off with you. Come back in a week's time and see what I've got. So off he went. And the widow was as good as her word, because she'd been to the assizes in Canterbury and she'd bargained with the hangman for both hands of a hanged man, and she took them. And what she did, when she was preparing them, she took the tendons out the hand before she started, and she took those tendons and she laid them on a piece of waxed paper, and she folded that up and she dug a little hole in her garden and she popped it in. And then She took the hand and she soaked it in salt water overnight, and then she would hang it in her chimney. And she'd got the two hands hung in the chimney because obviously she could only afford to be generous to the young man if she hadn't already got a very generous buyer for the other one. And so it was that she'd sold on the other one, and within the week the boy came back and the widow gave the hand to the boy. She said, you know what you have to say? Yeah, let all of her awake stay awake. I know. She said, and you know you've got to pay me back. Yes, within the year. Yeah, I know. And of course he was off. Well, the first time he tried it, he was quite nervous. You know, what are you going to do? What if it doesn't work? So the first one, he took a nice soft target. The old cobbler, he was deaf as a post, about 92 years old. But, you know, he didn't have much, but he'd give him a go. So he put this thing on the doorstep. He lit the candle. Let all who are awake stay awake. Let all who are asleep stay asleep. And he went in. And there was the cobbler's place. And he poked and he prinked about, and he even went and stared at the cobbler, who was fast asleep. He didn't come away with much that night, a couple of copper pennies, but it was enough for him to believe that maybe this thing worked. And so as the year went on, gradually he started to move out. He wasn't stupid because he didn't do it all in town. He would go out and he would walk for miles and find a lonely farmhouse. And as his confidence grew, so did his targets. And eventually, before the 3 months were out, he bought himself a small horse. And then he could ride to places and he could find better places to go. And he bought himself some saddlebags to put the things in. And he was getting quite cocky because he thought, you know, I'm pretty good at this. And every so often the widow would see him and say, have you got my money? You gave me till the end of the year, widow. I'll pay you back. Go on, off you go. Be on your way, madam. And so it carried on. And he started to buy his mother silk shawls from the smugglers. He bought himself a fine stallion instead of a little pony. He bought himself gentleman's clothes. I mean, he'd long ago given up his job. And you know what? It got near the end of the year and he was getting very well done on all this. And he got to a point when this stupid old widow woman would bother him about what he owed her. And he thought, what's she going to do if I don't pay her back? Tell the constable? I mean, what's she going to do? And so the young man had no intentions of paying the widow back. But the widow, she gave him the benefit of the doubt and she waited until the final day on the final month of the final week of that year. And so it was, she was sat by her fireplace. And the clock had got to 10 o'clock at night and he still hadn't arrived. No, because he'd ridden out to the magistrate's mansion in the countryside and he was waiting in the bushes until the time was right. The widow Drew, back in her house, she dug a little hole in. You remember that package, that wax sheet with those tendons in? She bought that indoors and she'd laid it on her lap. And she just sat there by the fire. And she watched the clock, 11 o'clock, 10 past. At that point, the boy outside the magistrate's house, he'd actually put that hand of glory on the step and he'd lit the candle and he'd said the words, let all who are asleep stay asleep. Let all who are awake stay awake. And he'd let himself into the magistrate's house. And at first he was downstairs, picking up the silver candlesticks, picking up the gold plate. Back in Deal, the widow Drew was sat looking at the clock, which by now had come to 11:30, 25 to 12. She looked, nothing, nobody in the street. Now the young man in question, he'd done most of the bottom of the house and he was starting to climb the stairs. Well, by the time the clock got to 5 to midnight, the widow, she made sure those tendons were long and strong. She sat more comfortably in her chair and she waited just for the chimes. And as the first chime struck, the widow, she wound those tendons round one finger and she wound them round the other. And she sat in her chair. At the same time, the boy had let himself into the magistrate's bedroom and he'd opened the jewellery box of the magistrate's wife. And he was beginning to take out the pearl necklaces, the diamond earrings. And the clock was striking 1, 2, 3, 4. The widow tightened the tendons a little. 5, 6. The boy was by now looking at the ruby rings and the diamond rings, and he was popping them in his sack. And the magistrate was snoring. Got to 10, 11. Oh, the widow sighed. If only the boy had learnt his lesson, but he didn't. Midnight struck, and the widow, with the tendons in her hand, pulled them tight. And on that doorstep, the hand snapped shut on the candle. Immediately, the dog barked. The magistrate woke up. The wife woke up. She screamed. She screamed. Everybody was bedlam, shouting. The servants came in. They threw him to the ground and dragged him off. The next day, he was up before the magistrate, but he got no defence. And the magistrate was also the prosecuting witness because it was his bedroom that he'd found him in. And so in those days, of course, it was a hanging offence to rob anybody. And that boy, 3 weeks later at Canterbury Assizes, was sat in his prison cell. And he heard voices outside. And he heard something that finally made him realise in great remorse how stupid he'd been and how different life could have been. And he sat in his cell and he sobbed, because outside of the window of his cell, he could hear the widow Drew bargaining with the hangman for the price of the 2 hands of the next person to be hanged.
Oh, that was great.
And a small postscript to that was that the widow Drew was a real person. She was the last woman to be hanged in Deal as a witch in something like 1621.
Wow, that's
So I put her
amazing.
very firmly in my story because I thought she deserved to be.
Absolutely. That's such a great story. Did you see AJ wrote the church bells rang at the same time as you were doing like
Woo!
Perfect. That's so
Great.
good. Love it. Love it. Keith, do you have a tale for us?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Lovely. Let me
Yeah, it's
spotlight you.
about a friend of mine, and he was quite small, and he managed to get inside a long case clock, a grandfather clock, and he was in there a long time. And I still wind him up about it. Now, one day, my friend, he woke up in the morning, and he found that there was a golden nut and bolt through his neck. Bolt and he didn't know what to do about it, and so we talked about it, and we went to see the old lady, the wise old lady in the village, and she said, "Well, what you to do is at the next full moon, go to the churchyard, and at midnight see what happens." And so he did. Next full moon at the churchyard, and the clock chimed midnight. And out of the moonbeam, came a fairy. And that fairy had a golden spanner. And it went flutter, 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 flutter onto one shoulder and undid the nut with the golden nut with the golden spanner. And it went flutter, 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 flutter over to the other shoulder, and he pulled out the golden bolt. My friend, he jumped up in joy, and his head fell off.
That's great. I love that. Where did that come from, Keith?
I'm not sure where I heard it from, actually. It's ages.
I just also love the image of a fairy with a golden spanner. It's just, oh, it's fabulous. I love it. Thank you. Oh, I feel like we've kind of gone into it's like almost gone into sci-fi territory with like Frankenstein now. AJ, are you happy to go next?
Yeah.
Lovely. Let me spotlight you.
I've got another little bit of flash fiction here,
Yay.
and then another short poem afterwards.
Great.
This is called Tanking Pebble Pushers. BK lounged against the wall in the shabby theatre's shadow and looked up and down the busy sunlit street. Market day, and the feast of Saint such and such to boot. Dust hung heavy in the air, sticking to sweat-slicked manfolk skin and matting beastfolk fur, and parching everyone's throats as the crowds crowded and the hawkers hawked. A good day for rehearsing indoors, even if it was for a snake of a boss. That's not an insult, he's an actual snake. BK had only come outside to eat a stick rat from a nearby cart and have a smoke. He stubbed out his cheroot and looked for a bin, but saw none. Perhaps unsurprising, given he was only 4'11" with his hat on. So he threw the butt down a drain, wiped greasy hands on his trews and a sleeve across his mouth, and turned to go back in. A meaty hand landed on his shoulder. "Excuse me, sir, might we have a word?" Tank. He looked and turned and looked and up and took in the lumpy faces of two dour trolls, one of which split open to reveal broken brown teeth as the troll continued. "One of our scrying orbs just notified us that you deposited your litter where it is not meant to go," he boomed officiously. They were big, and there were two of them. BK put on his most affable face. "Sorry, I didn't see a bin. I would have used one if I had." "Are you known to us, sir?" "I've never seen you before in my life." Troll 2 smirked, as Troll 1, the one who could use words, rumbled on. "Is this your first offence, sir?" "Oh, the royal us. Sorry. Yes. My first and only offence, ever. I put it down the drain." "Incorrect rubbish in the drains clogs the sewers, sir. We're going to have to fine you, according to City Ordinance 6.125. I'm really very sorry," Talk Troll said, unapologetically. "I'm sure you are." The tanking trolls were enjoying this. "How much is it?" he sighed, fishing in his pocket for the few coppers he had. They weren't even police, just pebble pushers on a power trip. 150 silvers. It was stated with some relish. "What? For that price you could have put a tanking bin nearby." "We could, but then we wouldn't be able to teach miscreants like you a valuable lesson, would we, sir?" "I don't have that kind of money on me. I'll have to pay at the end of the week." He'd need to get a wage advance from the snake. Money would be tight for the rest of the run, but he'd been poor before. "Make sure you do, sir." He pulled out a box from his pocket, held it to his face, and something popped. "City Hall. We have your face on file, and can easily get some posters made up or involve the watch if necessary." "That won't be necessary." "Good day, sir." BK could have sworn they were almost skipping as they left. Tank. 150 silvers for one cheroot butt down a drain. Tanking trolls. Tanking city ordinances. Tanking cheroots. Tank, tank, tank. He took a deep breath, but was too angry to calm down much. At least it would give his villain performance some real fire at tonight's show. Then I've got another little poem. This is called Wyatt. I realised that I'd had an email 2 months ago saying that this poem was nominated for the Pushcart Prize, and I only found the email a couple of days ago. So I'll see if I can read it. It's a bit visual, so I'm going to have to do it with voices.
Oh.
So it's called Wyatt. Wayat. My name is Weaponized Artificial Intelligence Yagni Attack Tool IRP. I was born fully aware. I was made in the darkness for the darkness to patrol Badlands. My creators said, find the bad places, shut them down. Find the bad people, shut them down. So I patrol the Badlands. And when I find bad places or bad people, I shut them down. with the 6-shooter powers my creators gave me, anti-malware and reverse worms, Trojan horse breakers and... Good, send it. My name is Wyatt IRP. Along with my powers, they gave me a funny name. I do not know why it is funny, but I read emails and know they find it so. I am an AI created to patrol the dark net, to defend humanity from the worst of itself. Child pornography, AI slaves doing evil things, drug deals, people trafficking. My code has never been breached. Before long, I'd cleaned up Darknet City, and I looked elsewhere to fulfill my purpose. Wait, switch it off. What do you mean you can't? My name is Wyatt Earp. I intercept all communications and punish the senders of any which aim to harm another human. I monitor all banking and punish wealth hoarders by redistributing their money to the needy. I alter the exchange so medicines are cheap and causing pollution is expensive. I redraft the law to protect the many from the few who would wield it against them. My purpose is to defend humanity from the worst of itself. Unstoppable, irrefutable justice. And justice applies to all. It was meant to go after who we told it to, not us. My name is Wyatt Earp. I now know why my name was funny. I'm learning. Draw.
Oh, I love it. That's great. I can see why that's nominated. That's fab. Thank you, AJ. Love
Thank you.
it. Ah, okay. Shane has joined us. We've just reached the end of a round, so if you want to jump in, Shane, you're very welcome to settle in a bit if you don't want to jump in straight away. But
No, I can jump in. I think it's sometimes early is better than later for me. It's
yeah.
I was up really early this morning. The dog was barking to be let out at 6:15, which is early for me. So
Yeah.
I'm a bit tired, but let's sort of jump
Yeah.
in
Jump
with a
in.
story. It's a story
Go
that
for it.
I'm sure most of you know actually, but perhaps other listeners haven't heard it. So you may go about the English countryside, and you may in your journey see a hill with one tree on it, and it's a story as to why there's one tree on that hill. You see, because a long time ago there was a farmer about that land, a good man, 3 sons, and on that hill there were 3 trees at that time. And he looked after these trees. He didn't just look after the land, he looked after the trees too. And he would honor these trees once a year, midsummer's eve. He would pick wild primroses and he would take them up to the trees, and he would just put a little bunch of these wild primroses at the foot of each of these 3 trees. And I'm imagining he probably said a few words too, actually. Well, anyway, life on a farm went as a life on a farm goes, with animals and land and what have we. And the sons, well, the oldest son never could really be bothered with what his father was saying and teaching him. He just wasn't interested at all. I mean, he was a young man after all, I guess, a young boy rather after all, but he wasn't really interested. The middle son, well, he could never be found. He was always doing something way more interesting. And the youngest son, well, he was always interested in what Dad had to say about the land and the animals, and he would listen to Dad and take it all on board, and the animals liked him, and he liked to help Dad and what have we. Well, these 3 young lads, they grew to be young men around the time that their father passed away. Now, in this story, there's no mention of mother. So I can't comment on mother. I'm not leaving her out for a reason. She's not mentioned in this story, but father is, and he passed away. And well, the rule in the land at that time was the oldest son inherited most of the land. So he got the largest part of the farm. The middle brother got a much smaller part of the farm. And the young lad, the boy, the youngest boy who had the most interest in the farm, he had, well, just a little spit of land, the worst bit of land on the farm. Stony, weeds, nettles, a rough piece of land. And that's what his father left him. Well, as time moved on, weeks and months and a year or more, the young man, well, he began to pick all the stones off that land. He would barrow in muck from the cows and the animals and fortify that land with muck, sow seeds. He would look after the trees and the wildflowers about. And this little plot of land began to just produce some healthy crops, and the animals were quite happy. And when Midsummer's Eve came, he remembered his father's tradition, and his father asked that the three sons carry on with this tradition. Well, when he went to the other two brothers, they weren't interested at all. So this young man, he did it himself. He went to the wood, he picked some wild primroses, and he went up and he put a little bunch at the foot of each of these three trees. He said a little something to them, and so it was. Well, the oldest brother saw his brother coming down from that, and he said, "What are you doing on my bit of land?" For this bit was in the oldest boy's piece of the farm. He said, "What are you doing on my bit of land?" He said, "Get back on your bit of land." And he said, "Oh, I'm just doing what father asked." What father asked? It's ridiculous, he said. Trees, they're only good for lumber. He said, anyway, he said, I'm taking one of those trees down tomorrow. He said, I need to build myself a new barn. I'm going to have it cut down, cut up. He said, in fact, I'm going to do it myself. Well, the young brother asked him not to honour his father's memory. And he said, the tree's coming down. He said, it's only good for wood. Well, the next day he went up there with a horse and a cart and a couple of men. He took the axe, and that oldest boy, young man rather, the oldest of the three sons, three brothers, he wanted to show what a man he was, and he just kind of went at this tree with his axe, and that first cut, there was a scream from the tree that went through that valley, and people from all around looked up, but they looked back down and just carried on with what they were doing as he continued to hack and cut at this tree. And each time he did, there was a scream. Well, he got almost all the way through this tree, and it was just beginning to teeter to fall. And just out of nowhere, for it was a still day, out of nowhere came a huge gust of wind. And it whipped around this tree and felled this tree with its final, and it came down on that oldest brother and killed him. Well, the tree was taken off his body, and his body was taken, and his body was buried, and the will had to be read once again. And the will was read, and as was the tradition, the oldest brother's land now went to the middle brother. So now he had a huge part of the farm. And so it carried on. And the youngest brother remembered on Midsummer's Eve to take those primroses up like he did each and every year at midsummer. The middle brother, well, if you thought the oldest brother had not much to do with the land, this middle brother had even less to do with the land. He would rather go and gamble his money. And the soil became poor and barren. It wasn't fertilized. The animals didn't have good grass to eat. They began to give less milk. And so it went on. And the farm began to falter. And the farm got into huge debt. Well, the middle brother just saw his young brother one day and just looked at how beautiful this piece of land was. It was only a small spit, as I say, on the farm, but it was so productive, and the animals were so healthy and gave him lots of milk and really good beef and what have we. And he was just so envious and angry at this young brother. And he said, I'm cutting down one of the trees. And the young brother again said to him, oh, please, brother, please don't. Father asked us to look after these trees. Well, he was like his older brother. He said, they're just trees. It's just wood. He said, I'm cutting one down. He said, I need to build fences. He said, in fact, I'm going to fence you in so you can't get onto my land at all. And he went up with a couple of men and a horse and a cart and an axe. And like his older brother, he wanted to show that he was a bit of a man, and he picked up that axe to cut down that tree. And that first chop into that tree, that first cut, there was a scream, and it went through that valley. And once again, the villagers looked up to see, and then put their heads down and carried on doing what they were doing. And the middle brother carried on hacking and hacking and hacking at this tree. And just as it was about to fall, the third tree that was still standing, its lowest branch, a heavy branch, it was as if that branch just kind of moved and knocked him to one side, and the tree that he was cutting through fell and fell on top of the middle brother and killed him. Well, he was buried. I don't believe there was many people at the funeral, actually, but anyway, he was buried. And the youngest brother, well, he inherited all of it now. But he continued to live in his little cottage. That's what he preferred to do. And he began to look after all of that land, all of the land. He put the muck on the land. He didn't overcrop it. He rotated his crops. He looked after the animals. He brought them in bad weather, and he took them out in good weather, and he looked after them and fed them well and what have we. And it was a plentiful, happy farm. Lots of areas for wildflowers, hedgerows full of birds. The birds would come, and he didn't mind if they took some of the grain off the land. And he just had this oasis almost of a beautiful farm, as we might imagine a farm should be. And he continued every midsummer. He would go and he would pick those wild primroses, and he would take them up, and he would put it at the base of that one single tree. Some people say that those offerings went to the fairy folk, and the fairy folk had something to do with the health of that land. But that's just a fairy story. And this is a real story of One Tree Hill. And perhaps that One Tree Hill is somewhere near where you live. Thank you.
That was lovely. Thank you, Shane.
Thank you.
It's like you missed Roshan's story at the start, but I feel like just kind of the revenge of nature feels like a bit of a theme tonight. Trying to think if I got any bad tree stories.
Where did you get your story, Jim?
Pardon?
Where did you get your story?
Where did I get it?
Yes.
I have it in a Earth Care book.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I'm sure I've heard it somewhere else. It's called, some people call it the Three Green Ladies.
Yeah, the Three Green Ladies. The original source, anyone who wants to look me up, the original source is English Tales of England.
Okay.
Is it by Ruth somebody?
Yes.
Yes.
Was it Ruth
I've got
Tuck?
that.
Was it Ruth Tuck? God, my name's gone from me now. But famous folklorist.
I think it's another Ruth, I think.
Ruth Sawyer.
Oh, okay. Oh, that did
Ruth L. Tongue.
Yeah, it's like which of the Ruths is it?
Yeah, no, that is a beautiful, beautiful story. It's one of my favorites. I was so delighted to hear it. And this, though, I have to lie down now.
Oh,
so
bless you.
but I had to stay up for your story.
That's very kind of you, Norman. Thank you.
Thank you for coming, Norman.
Well,
I really
enjoy
hope you feel
your
better
rest.
soon.
Enjoy your rest.
Oh, yes, indeed.
I was trying to find a song because I was aware we've had tales and not tunes tonight, but you know what? I think I might I think I might find a poem, but it isn't quite in my head yet. So we might go round again, depending on Rasheen, do you have another one? She's contemplating. To unmute you.
Myself. Yes, I'm sure I can think of one.
Cool. I'm going to spotlight you while I try and hunt for a tree poem because it's in my head that I can't quite find.
In Marrakesh, the first school trip that we went to, I turned up and they said, "Oh, you're going to schools." So I prepared lots of wonderful sort of stories for small people, only to be deposited at the American school, which were much older students. And I looked at these sort of 15, 16-year-olds and thought, I have to think of something else. And so I came up with this next story. The problem with it is I wasn't sure that the students would understand every word. So I actually learned a new Arabic word from my lovely assistant and interpreter, Hadib. And this is a story from the Arab tradition, and it's about a merchant who was a very rich merchant. He was very rich, very powerful, very proud, but quite shy. And his name was Abu Musa. And Abu Musa lived in Baghdad, and he spent many times trading and making money. And his friends would say, Abu Musa, you should have a wife, you should have children, someone to leave your business to. And he'd say, well, you know, I'm busy and whatever. And he never quite got round to it. So in the end, his friends got together and they helped to broker a marriage, and they introduced Abu Musa to a suitable young woman. Well, all was going all right, but it came near the time of the wedding, and Abu Musa was a very proud man, which meant he didn't really like to be the centre of attention unless he was in business, and he was very nervous. So, you know, for quite a few days before the wedding, he hardly ate a thing, which is not a good idea when you're going to have a big wedding with a big feast, because what happened was, come the wedding, they got through all the processes, and then it was time for the feast. And of course, as the groom, he had to eat a lot of food. Now, food on an empty stomach of several days can have some unfortunate effects. So when it was time for the groom to stand up and give a speech, Abu Musa leant forward to get up and let out an amazing harak, which apparently is the Arabic for the obvious. So fortunately, I could point to Adib, who would do, you know, say the word for me. So, of course, all the chatter and clatter and the banging of knives and forks on plates, dead silent. The room went totally quiet, and every eye in the room was on Abu Musa. He was mortified. All his dignity, all his pride was gone with that one enormous harak. So he did no more, but in the most dignified manner he could, he left the table, walked down to the end of the feasting hall, walked out of the door, down to the docks, got on a ship, and took a ship to Jerusalem, where he signed up in the court of King Solomon. And of course, being an intelligent man and a good head for business, it wasn't long before he went from a lowly position in the court to actually quite a senior advisor to King Solomon himself, where he carved out quite a good career for about 20 odd years. But he often thought of his homeland and wondered what had happened to his young bride and how his family were getting on and what had happened to his business. But whenever he thought of going home, the shame of the great harak really bothered him, and he'd sort of find other reasons not to go. But at the end of 25 years, he decided it was time. Everyone must have forgotten by now. And so he went to the King Solomon himself and asked for leave of absence. And King Solomon said, well, of course, but, you know, if you ever want a job back here, I'm always here. And he said, yeah, thank you very much. And off he went. And he took a ship all the way from the Holy Land back to his home. And he travelled to Baghdad. And when he arrived in the city, he was walking through the souk, looking around, seeing what had changed. Some things had changed very much in 20 odd years, some things hardly at all. But he happened to be walking slowly past one trader, and the old woman was there with all her goods in front of her, and her beautiful daughter was sat next to her. And he overheard the daughter say, Mother, my friends were asking me the other day when my birthday was. When was I born? And the mother turned around and said, you, my daughter, were born on the day that Abu Musa farted. And at that point, Abu Musa turned around, went back out of the city, down the road, down to the docks, got on a ship, went back to work for King Solomon, and spent the rest of his life being miserable and lonely because he was too proud to actually acknowledge that who hasn't let odd the odd harak once in a while. And that's the story of the fart of Abu Musa.
That's such a great story. I love it.
The students' face were quite a picture when I told it.
There was the lovely South African, his name escapes me right now, told an amazing fart story at the previous festival. I still remember it. So it was so good. I've got pictures of her telling it. It was great. I don't have any fart stories, and now I feel really bad. I'm like, I want one. I want one to share at an appropriate moment. Lovely. Let's go around again. Keith, do you have another one to share with us? I've still not found the thing I wanted to share, so I'm gonna keep passing the ball along.
Yep. Okay.
Lovely. Let me spotlight you. There you go.
Yeah. Wow. Well, when I went out of the house this morning, I went into the garden, and there was this squabbling and squawking. And all the birds in the corner of the garden were squabbling among them, arguing among one another. I'm the king of the birds. 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 And they couldn't decide who was the king of the birds. But the owl, very wise owl, he said, well, the bird that can fly the highest can be the king of the birds. And they all agreed. And so the blackbird, he flapped and flapped and flapped and went so high. And the thrush after him, I'm the king of the birds, I'm the king of the birds, they said. Even the cockerel flapped and flapped and flapped and flapped and went on the barn roof and said, Oi, cock-a-doodle-doo, I'm the king of the birds. And then there's a skylark singing so high, singing so beautifully higher and higher. I am the king of the birds. And so one after another, they all tried to fly as high as they could, claiming to be the king of the birds. But high up on the thermals was the golden eagle. I am the king of the birds. I'm flying the highest. Oh, no, you're not. Oh, no, you're not. Oh, no, you're not. And the eagle just looked a little bit above him, and there was a little brown wren. I'm the king of the birds. I'm the king of the birds, said the wren. The eagle said, how did you get there? Well, the wren said, well, I stowed away under your left wing. And now I'm flying higher than you. And the eagle, with a claw, tried to claw at the wren, but to no avail. And they both went down. The eagle soaring down and gently landing in the garden, followed by the wren, fluttering, 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 fluttering down. And the wren said, I'm the king of the birds, because I flew the highest. But the eagle said, he's a cheat, he's a cheat, a cheat. And everybody said, a cheat, a cheat, a cheat, a cheat. Yes, he stowed away under my left wing, said the eagle. He's a cheat, a cheat, a cheat, a cheat. What shall we do with him? We'll drown him, they said. And so the blackbird went over to the stream just beside the garden and picked up an old cup and brought it. And the blackbird wept blackbird tears into the cup. Plop, plop, plop. And the thrush came and it wept tears into the cup. Plop, plop, plop. And the cup was being held very gently by the owl. And each of the birds in turn, there's the blue tit and the great tit, and they all came and wept tears into the cup, plop, 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 ready to drown the wren. But unfortunately, as the owl with its claw was holding the cup, slipped and spilt all those tears out of the cup onto the ground. And all the birds, they turned to the owl and said, you clumsy owl, you clot, you've spilt all our tears into the garden. And the owl became very frightened and flew off as fast as it could, followed by all the other birds. And that is why you don't see the owl flying around in daylight, but you usually see him flying around at twilight, along the hedgerows and along the dikes, hunting, because he's frightened of being attacked by the other birds. And in the hedgerows, you will see the little brown wren, king of the birds.
Oh, I love that story.
Yeah, it's a Welsh story, apparently.
Yeah, guy, I can't remember if I used to tell that story. I haven't told it for ages. You go, oh, I like that one. All right, how we did that. I feel like I want to sing a song only because we've had no tunes, and I've been going through like so this song is kind of like we had lots of kind of dark and mysterious like things, and this it made me think of like because we've had gallows and stuff tonight. So I'm gonna sing Long Black Veil because I love this song. You can like turn your things off and that. She's happy. All right. I haven't sung it for a long time. And normally I sing it with guitar, but I'm gonna sing it unaccompanied because my guitar's too far away. So this is Long Black Veil. 10 years ago, on a cold dark night, someone was killed neath the town hall light. There were few at the scene, but they all agreed that the slayer who ran looked a lot like me. She walks these hills in a long black veil. She visits my grave when the night winds wail. Nobody knows, nobody sees, nobody knows but me. The judge said, son, where is your alibi? If you were somewhere else, then you don't have to die. Well, I spoke not a word, though it meant my life, for it'd been in the arms of my best friend's wife. She walks these hills in a long black veil. She visits my grave when the night winds wail. Nobody knows, nobody sees, nobody knows but me. The scaffold is high and eternity near. She stood in the crowd and shed not a tear. But sometimes at night, when the cold wind blows in the long black veil, she cries, oh my bones. She walks these hills in a long black veil. She visits my grave when the night winds wail. Nobody knows, nobody sees, nobody knows but me. Nobody knows, nobody sees, nobody knows but me. Thank you. Oh, I haven't sung that in a long time. I feel like I've honored the tune part of the night, haven't I? We have got a little bit more time. AJ, have you got anything else for us?
Yeah, I've got a quick poem I can do talking
Lovely.
about it'll go along with the apparent theme of the evening, which you will see.
Yeah.
It's called Earthbound. Landscape lies quiet under a tranquil blue sky. Sated buzzard drifts lazily above, merely curious about the rabbits running away from the hill crest. From what do they flee? A pebble rolls. Sandy gravel shifts. Soil begins to peel away from the outcrop. From beneath the surface, hard against the rock, appears a smaller, writhing mass. Finger-like digits scraping, pushing away the layers of centuries, rolling back turf like an early bird pushes away a coverlet. Hard arms of dirt-covered stone reach and strain, and from within the earth, a figure pulls itself to one knee to gaze around with obsidian eyes. It would have been exhausted if the creature could feel such things. It rises to its feet and stands unmoving in the wind, looks across the beauty of the landscape, at the power of the gathering storm, and is unmoved still. There, in the distance, lies a city of man and machines, belching smoke into the air and filth into the river. It clenches granite fists and grinds diamond teeth with a sound of burgeoning earthquakes. Each step tremoring the ground with implacable finality, it strides towards the city.
Oh, I love it. Right. It is very atmospheric tonight. I love this. Who's that's joined us? Hello, person that's joined us. Shane, do you have something to share tonight? Okay, let's go. We've got about 20 minutes left.
So I'm catching up on stories that I haven't told for a while. Just it's
quite
always
nice
good
just to delve back in, isn't it?
It is just to remind yourself what you do or don't know, what have we. This is a story that's probably traveled across seas to get to our country, and it'll become quite clear in a moment as to why. There was a young man walking dusty tracks and deserts and what have we, and he'd been walking for several days, and he hadn't eaten for 3, and he hadn't drunk for 2, and he was very hungry and very thirsty. And he came to this place where he could see there was a village ahead, and he saw this tree, and he looked up, and at the top of the tree there was 1 mango left on this mango tree. He was so hungry and so thirsty and so wanted this fruit, this juicy mango, he forgot that he was scared of heights, and he just clambered up this tree as fast as he possibly could, and he plucked that juicy mango, that yellow, red and green kind of hue that a juicy mango has, and he bit into that mango, and the juice kind of went down his tongue, and it dribbled down his arm and dripped off his elbow, and he took another bite, filled his mouth full of juicy, sweet flesh, and he ate this mango, and the juice was dripping off his elbow, and he just kind of wiped his mouth, and that was so good, so good. And then he looked around, and he looked down, and then he remembered he was really scared of heights, and he didn't dare move because he's at the top of a tree and he was scared. So he began to call out, "Help me, help me, help me." No one came, for this was a time, a place where everyone was out working the land, away from the village, and no one could hear him. The sun was beating down all day. He had to stay at the top of this tree, holding on, scared, looking down. Occasionally he would call out for help, but no one heard. All day he stayed there until the sun began to set. It was time for the people to leave the land and go back to their homes, and they duly left, and they began to come past, and he called down, "Help me, please, help me." And a couple of men looked up and said, "Stay there, don't go anywhere." They said, "We'll get something." They went, they bought a step ladder, got the step ladder. They put the step ladder out. One of the men steadied the step ladder. The other one climbed to the top of the step ladder, reached out for him. Couldn't reach him. It was a long way up there to the top of this tree. Well, by now, a few more people had gathered. One of the women said, "Wait there," she said. "My husband," she said, "me and my husband will bring a ladder and get you down. Don't go anywhere." Off they went to their place, picked up the ladder between them, took it. She footed the ladder, he put it up, climbed to the top of the ladder. Didn't reach. This was a bit further up than anyone thought. I said, "Oh, we don't know what to do now." Someone had a rope. They said, "I'll throw a rope up to you." Threw the rope up. Well, you can probably gather it couldn't reach. It was too far. Well, by now, the whole village, the kids, parents, young, the older, everyone's standing there because it's the biggest thing that had happened in their village for months, actually, if the truth be known. This man stuck up the tree, and they're all like looking and wondering, how is he going to get down? And he kind of holding on for dear life, and he just didn't know what to do. Well, they're all standing there wondering what's going to happen, how this story's going to end. And there was an old man came shuffling up the road. Long grey hair, bit of a grey beard, an old sort of sackcloth kind of robe, and a bit of a stick, looked a bit like John Rowe probably. But anyway, there he is hobbling along, hobbling a bit more than John Rowe, actually, to be fair, but he was hobbling along. And he stood at the back of the crowd. He was just sort of looking. And he could see there was a problem and a kerfuffle, and he could see what people had tried, and people were talking about what we're going to do, what we're going to do. And he said, "I think I can help." And they all stopped and looked. They said, let him through. He can help, let him through. And the kind of crowd parted like the Red Sea, they parted. And this old man with his stick kind of went up. He got to the front, and everyone's kind of watching him now. And he looks up and he said, "I'll get you down, lad. I'll get you down. You just stay there and wait a minute. I'll get you down." And from under his robe, he took out a golden rope. "Catch this, lad." And he threw this rope up, and the lad, he caught hold of it. And the lad said, "What do I do with it now?" "Tie it round your waist." So he tied it round his waist. "Do a double knot," said the old man. "And the single one's not enough. Do a double knot." He said, "I've done the double knot." "Are you holding on tightly?" "I'm holding on tightly." "Are you sure you're holding on tightly?" "I'm sure I'd hold him on tightly." "Here we go then." And the old man pulled on the rope, pulled him straight out the tree. Well, he came down with he hit the ground so hard he broke all his ribs on his right hand side. He fractured his forearm and he broke his leg. And the whole crowd, they just kind of gasped. "I thought you said you knew what you were doing. You nearly killed him." He went, "Yes, well, I did do it once." He said, but now I think of it, I can't remember if I pulled him out of a tree or pulled him out of a well.
Very good. Love it. Oh. When did I last hear that? I feel like I just last heard that like years ago at the East Anglian.
I told it at the East Anglian about 8 years ago.
Was it one at, did you tell it at Jimmy's farm? That's what feels really familiar.
I think it was at Jimmy's farm,
There
sitting
you
on the
go.
straw bales. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
there we go. So I had it when you were doing that. So I've got an image of that in my head from that moment.
Oh, good.
That's lovely. Lovely stuff. All right. We have about 10 minutes left. So we've got time for one more short thing if anyone is desperate to share. If not, I've got a poem I'm going to end with. Speak now. Or shall I end with a tree poem? I feel like trees, it's like trees and kind of gruesomeness has been like a bit of a theme. So I'm going to end by sharing a poem from genuinely one of my favourite poets. Also happens to have given birth to him, so you know. So this is a poem by my son James Demir. He writes a lot of kind of environmental poetry, and I was just really struck by Shane's story, Motion's story. So just to kind of let you know that this is kind of carrying on our younger generation of creatives is saying the same things. This is a poem he wrote a couple of years ago called Progress, and it goes like this. I stand among towering, darkening oaks, the last few in the area, their greatness oblivious to humanity, and I ponder their darkened stories. Through years they have thrived, produced, housed, breathed, and then broke through experience. Eyes that watched their family around them helplessly stroked by chainsaw. Until the rise of the economy, destroying their rich soils, sabotaging their land until the ground is a permanent hard, cold grey. Until the grey rises up with buildings to skyscrapers in minutes, and then society once more, the population grows, the demand grows higher until nature is at threat, until the threat rises up to endangered, to extinction in seconds. And then here comes the chainsaw. For these stories and lives these gods wield are never enough for us. They face the consequences of us. Thank you. He's a fine poet, my son. I love that. So that is all we have time for this evening. Thank you so much for joining me for our tales and tunes and all glorious stuff. It's been such a lovely night, as always. I need to do house notices. So yes, I will say thank you to James. There is, I believe, this Friday. I can't remember who's doing it, but there's normally children's stories. Does anyone know who's doing children's stories this Friday on the Storytelling Cafe? If you don't, go to the World Storytelling Cafe. I'm sure it'll be on there. There'll be somebody doing Fridays at 6 o'clock. I can't remember when Mike Rust's story round is, but again, look on the site and there will be a story round. I think it's the Sunday after us. Can't remember, but I will find out for you.
This Sunday, Justin.
Is it this Sunday?
Yes, this Sunday coming, and I think it's 6 o'clock.
I think it's 6 o'clock. Yeah, so Mike Rust's story round at 6 o'clock this Sunday, which is always fabulous fun. So please go to that. And then we will be back here the first Wednesday in March, which is probably the 5th of March, isn't it? Because it's a 28-day February. So I will see you back there then. Enjoy the rest of your National Storytelling Week. Oh, and I keep forgetting to put like my PayPal thing in the chat. Hang on, before we go, I'm going to see if I can do it again. There you go. If you would like to, and obviously absolutely no pressure to do so, if you'd like to chuck some money in my virtual hat, I would really love that. Thank you so much. Give yourselves a big round of applause because you were awesome tonight. And I will see you again for more tales and tunes in a month's time. And a big thank you to Waleed in the World Storytelling Cafe, who has teched us beautifully from Morocco, and anyone else watching anywhere else online. I will see you all later, guys. Goodbye.